French president seeks to clarify France's role in Rwanda's genocide. UN chief meets Eastern Libya commander as fighters close in on Tripoli. UN to assist in removing explosives from residential areas in Somalia. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. Tonight, I'm alongside my colleague Rama Nyang, who has our business headlines. Rama?
Thank you very much, Richard. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Nigeria plans to raise some $5 billion in foreign and local bonds in order to fund infrastructure development. And oil prices approach $70 a barrel as US crude output reaches record levels. We'll have the details and the numbers on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, though, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Richard.
Thank you, Rama. We begin the bulletin in Rwanda, where French President Emmanuel Macron has appointed a group of researchers to carry out a 2-year probe aimed at shedding light on the role of the French army in the Rwandan genocide 25 years ago. The probe comes 2 days before the country commemorates the massacre which killed 800,000 people. Meanwhile, the president of the Iboka Victims Association is calling on the French to make the tragedy a part of collective memory.
Macron already discussed it almost a year ago in May 2018. He said that he will make the genocide of Tutsis a part of collective memory. But that has to be shared. It has to stop being just a subject of conflict that divides people. To achieve this, we need to work on transparency, sufficient information, dialogue, instead of having silence, which is opposed to revelations.
Well, CGTN's Alina Casas joins us from Paris for more on the story. Alina, thank you for taking time out to join us here on Africa Live. French President Emmanuel Macron on Friday appointed a panel of experts to investigate France's actions in Rwanda during the country's genocide 25 years ago. What more can you tell us about the commission?
Well, there are 9 historians and researchers, experts in the Rwandan genocide on this commission. They're going to be looking through state archives dealing with France's role in Rwanda between 1990 and the genocide in 1994. That includes military and diplomatic archives and, of course, the presidential archives of François Mitterrand, who was president at the time. So most of these documents have already been declassified. Some of them haven't. Some of them are still confidential. They'll be going through. But most of this information is already available in the public realm somewhere, but the idea is that they'll be going through, they'll be investigating, they'll be interviewing witnesses, and that they'll put together a final report in 2 years' time with an interim one about a year from now.
I guess, Alina, the question that needs to be asked is, why now? Why is France setting up the commission now?
Well, of course, this is the 25th anniversary of the massacre, and this issue has been extremely controversial in France for all of those 25 years. The Rwandan government, of course, under President Paul Kagame, has repeatedly accused French troops who were present in Rwanda at the time under a UN peacekeeping mandate of being complicit in the genocide, of having supported the Hutu government who carried it out, and of having helped some of those soldiers to escape Rwanda at the time of the genocide. That's something that France has systemically denied. For French governments say that those soldiers attempted to save lives as much as they could, and they certainly deny any accusations of complicity. But the issue has made relations between France and Rwanda very tense in recent years. Emmanuel Macron is now trying to calm them. So this report is part of a commitment that he made to Kagame in May of last year during a meeting here in Paris. And it's also part of Macron's general attempt to change France's attitude towards Africa, and particularly African countries that were previously French colonies. We see it in other things, like his decision to admit last year that torture was systemic in Algeria during the war there, or his decision to send back artifacts that were taken during the colonial era and that are in museums in Paris to African countries. So this is all part of an attempt to change France's approach to Africa.
Well, Alina, you spoke of the fact that Rwanda has accused France of being complicit in the genocide. That's a subject that has dogged Franco-Rwandan relations since the 1994 massacres. How will the findings of the commission help rebuild the relationship, in your opinion?
Well, Macron's attempt, for Macron, it's an attempt to rebuild relations with Rwanda. It's something that the Rwandan government has asked for, and he hopes that this panel of historians will be perceived as neutral and that whatever findings they come up with, they will be accepted by the Rwandan government. There are a number of points here that remain controversial among historians: how soon the French government was aware that the genocide was taking place and how long it took those troops that were on the ground to react and to try and start to protect the Tutsis who were the victims of that massacre, how quickly the French government realised that was happening. That is very much a point of controversy. It's something that historians don't quite agree on. Also, the Rwandan government accuses France of having supplied arms to the Hutu government in the run-up to the massacre, which is true. They did sell arms to that government and did support it ahead of the massacre, but the French would say, and have always said, that they had no idea that that massacre was happening and that they were supplying arms to help the government defeat a rebellion that was taking place in the country at the time. So all of this remains extremely controversial, and certainly Macron and his government hope that whatever findings these historians come up with, they'll be able to calm some of these decades of controversy.
Well, thank you so much, Alina Cassis from Paris. We certainly appreciate your insight and analysis. Moving on. Meanwhile, a Rwandese genocide survivor continues to keep the memories of those killed alive at the Genocide Museum in Gisozi within the capital, Kigali. Let's take a look at that story.
Aline Uwase's workplace also doubles up as a site where more than 60 members of her family were buried during the 1994 genocide. She is a guide at Rwanda's Genocide Museum, the final resting place of more than 800,000 people killed during the 100 days of genocide.
Almost my whole mom's family are buried here, so standing here, it gives me I'm really, it's an honor. I'm very, how would I say it? It's an honor to me to be here.
UNICEF estimates that more than 300,000 children were either hacked or beaten to death.
The memorial room dedicated to kids is very touching. Every time that I enter the room, I'm never the same person when I get out. And there's this video in the museum where people were killed. I would ask myself, how can one person decide to kill innocent people? I mean, I would say the whole museum, the whole memorial, it's never easy. It's never easy to get in the museum, but I do that every day.
A national reconciliation drive has helped rebuild the country, honoring the victims of the devastating genocide.
In one way or another, we had to find a way to reconcile, not because we had to, but because we wanted peace, because I wanted peace. Not because those who killed my family, for those who took people's lives deserved to be forgiven, but because I deserved peace.
As the East African nation marks 25 years since a horrific ordeal, the country continues to focus on the future. Astatal, CGTN.
Let's now turn to Libya, where UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is meeting General Khalifa Haftar. Guterres is meeting with Haftar in an attempt to de-escalate the fighting between troops loyal to Haftar and the UN-backed government in Tripoli. The self-proclaimed Libyan National Army has been advancing towards Tripoli. Haftar launched the offensive in an effort to gain control of the capital. On Thursday, LNA troops took hold of Garyana, a town 80 kilometers from Tripoli. By early Friday, troops allied to the Tripoli government pushed back the LNA troops 30 kilometers from the capital city. Since 2011, Libya has faced instability with militias ruling different parts of the country. General Khalifa Haftar's militia controls the eastern part of Libya.
The people of Tripoli hopefully will be seeing the victories of the armed forces in accomplishing the main mission in the war against terrorism, which is purging of the capital. Therefore, the law enforcement in the capital will have an effect on the entire country.
Well, tension is brewing in Libya after forces loyal to Eastern Libyan commander Khalifa Haftar captured the city of Garyan, 100 kilometers south of the capital Tripoli. The United Nations Security Council says it is deeply concerned by the militia's movements and the risk of confrontation in the country. It's due to hold an emergency meeting later today. UN Chief Antonio Guterres is currently in Tripoli to promote peace talks. He has met with the head of the Tripoli-based government, Fayez al-Sarraj, and is due to hold talks with Khalifa Haftar.
A call of might, perhaps.
Today we will shake the land under the feet of the oppressors who transgressed beyond bounds in the lands and heaped therein mischief. Today our voice is loud, filling the skies. For you, Tripoli, for you, Tripoli.
The eastern-based troops are currently marching towards Tripoli, a strategy analysts believed is aimed at expanding Haftar's control and intimidate his rivals in the western part of the country. But many fear it will bring a conflict with Libya's internationally recognized government to a potentially dangerous new level.
I want to make a very strong appeal, an appeal for all military movements to stop, an appeal for containment, calm, de-escalation, both military and political and verbal de-escalation.
The Tripoli-based government says it's prepared to respond to any threats aimed at destabilizing the region. Local armed groups and the country's highest religious authority have also vowed to defend Tripoli.
We do not target these people. They are welcome to come and join us in the armed forces, and are welcome to come to the training centers and welcome in the military academies. We also welcome supporting them economically if they wanted that. So we need them to leave this battle because it's not a winning battle. It's a battle which includes people alongside the army, and not the army on its own, the people and the army.
The developments mark a dramatic escalation of a power tussle in Libya. It is also a setback for the UN and Western countries which have been trying to mediate between Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj and Haftar. Libya has remained beset by turmoil since 2011, following the ouster and death of President Muammar Gaddafi after 4 decades in power. Since then, the country's stark political divisions have yielded 2 rival seats of power, one in Al-Bayada, to which Haftar is linked, and another in Tripoli. Chomrono, CGTN.
Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is set to begin a 3-day tour of Egypt and Jordan. The foreign minister will meet with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and his Egyptian counterpart Sameh Shoukry. Top on the agenda will be strengthening bilateral relations and the preparations for the Russia-Africa summit due in October. The 3 leaders will also discuss the full resumption of Russian aviation to Egyptian international airports of Sharm el-Sheikh and Hurghada. Lavrov will then head to Jordan, where he will hold discussions with the Jordanian King Abdullah II and Foreign Minister of Jordan Ayman al-Safadi. Well, we are now joined by CGTN's Adel Al-Marouki in Cairo for more on this. Adel, thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking time out to join us here on Africa Live. Well, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has embarked on a 3-day trip to Egypt and Jordan. What more can you tell us about the visit?
Primarily, as you said, Lavrov will be here to discuss critical bilateral relations between Cairo and Moscow. The headline is basically restoring security in both Sharm el-Sheikh and Hurghada airports. There is a collaboration, security collaboration between Russia and Cairo in that regard, and that will be the opening gateway for resuming direct flights to these airports from Russia. It's a landmark step that Egypt has been looking forward to for several years since Russia has imposed its flights ban on Egypt. It has lifted it partially, allowing trips to come to Cairo International Airport, but the main touristic destinations remain a key issue of negotiations between both countries. because also Egypt is currently sitting in the chairmanship of the African Union. As you've mentioned, they will be discussing with President el-Sisi the anticipated Russian-African summit that will be in Sochi in October, the details of which will be coordinated with Egypt as it is chairing the AU this year. Beside that, regional issues, of course, will be discussed between both Lavrov, Sameh Shoukry, his Egyptian counterpart, and President el-Sisi.
All right, Adel, let me ask you this. Perhaps you can unpack this for us. How is the political and economic relationship between Russia and Egypt? And most importantly, how important is the Foreign Minister Lavrov's visit to Egypt?
To Egypt, Russia has been increasingly rising as a strong economic and military partner. Since President el-Sisi came to office about 5 years ago, one of the very first steps that he has taken was to approach better relations with Russia. It came during a time where there was huge tension between Cairo and Washington, D.C. Russia opened its arms widely. Accordingly, numerous business deals and military arms sales have been signed, multi-billion-dollar deals. We're talking about huge arms sales to Egypt, diversifying the infrastructure of the Egyptian military. And Russia has been designated to build Egypt's first nuclear power generator to produce electricity in northern Egypt. So this is a significant partnership that Egypt will not let go of quite easily. And President el-Sisi has actually been the leader to boost the bilateral relations between both countries. The timing is extremely crucial, not just for the bilateral relations, but more on the tension that is growing in the Middle East. We've seen what is going on with Libya, with LNA General Khalifa Haftar proceeding toward Tripoli. There are clashes being reported up till this hour. Cairo is a very strong supporter to the LNA and the Eastern government. Moscow, too, is a supporter in that line. So there is a huge coordination between both countries to do when it comes to Libya and, of course, in Syria as well. Last March, Lavrov had been touring the Gulf countries trying to convince them of resuming some normal ties with Syria, which Saudi Arabia has clearly rejected, but it is a file that Russia is hoping Egypt can help with.
All right. Adel El-Marouki, once again, great to see you. Thank you for that update and report. That is Adel El-Marouki reporting live from Cairo. You are watching Africa Live on CGTN. We have a lot more news coming your way after the break, including President Tshisekedi pledges to strengthen relations with the U.S. UN to assist in removing explosives from residential areas in Somalia.
You don't find stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. The president of the Democratic Republic of Congo has pledged to work with the United States government to deliver a better and more prosperous future for the Congolese people. Felix Tshisekedi made the remarks during his visit to the U.S., where he met with the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Some of Mr. Tshisekedi's party members have described his U.S. visit as the beginning of renewed ties between the two countries. CGTN's Chris Ochemringa has more from Kinshasa.
President Tshisekedi and Mike Pompeo expressed their common interest in working together to promote human rights, improve security, and fight corruption in the DRC. The country is reported to have lost as much as $15 billion to corruption annually during the tenure of former President Joseph Kabila. President Tshisekedi says he is committed to building transparent institutions and govern his country well. And with America's support, things could change.
The President's visit will enable us to reinforce our relationship with America. We will work together to fight corruption, poverty, and improve the delivery of basic services.
The relationship between the U.S. and the DRC was strained by Joseph Kabila, who clung on to power after the expiry of his presidential term in 2016. The U.S. has expressed support for President Tshisekedi's plans of improving his country. Just last month, the U.S. sanctioned 3 senior Congolese officials for reportedly undermining democratic processes in the DRC. The Congolese president also discussed the development of DRC's natural resources and combating the current Ebola outbreak with the U.S. Secretary of State. Chris Chamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta vowed to intensify the war on corruption in his annual State of the Nation address. Speaking before the Senate and Parliament in a live address to the country on Thursday, President Kenyatta said no one in his administration would be spared if found guilty. Robert Nagila has more on his call for Kenyans to support the fight against corruption.
This is how the leading dailies in Kenya covered President Uhuru Kenyatta's State of the Nation address, a constitutional requirement. The theme for this year's address was fighting corruption, and President Uhuru Kenyatta says his administration will not relent in the fight against corruption.
Mindful of my cardinal responsibility, which is to serve Kenyans, as bestowed upon me by the Constitution, my administration has opted for an all-out assault on corruption.
Several cabinet secretaries in President Kenyatta's administration have been questioned by investigators over allegations of corruption. While acknowledging public pressure, President Uhuru Kenyatta says anyone in his government charged with corruption in court will have to step aside until they clear their names. On regional matters, the president said Kenya will continue pushing for political and economic integration and work closely with its neighbors. Kenyatta also gave unqualified support to an initiative with the opposition to promote cohesion and stability in the country. The State of the Nation address is usually a scorecard of sorts on the current administration and its policies. On the economy, the president says the country is doing well, but more needs to be done to make life better for Kenyans. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Staying in Kenya, where the government and aid agencies are distributing food relief to drought-hit parts of the country. A hunger crisis has left at least 1 million people short of food. Lack of rains has caused crops to fail in the northern regions such as Turkana and Garissa. Let's take a look.
In a homestead in Lodwar, a town in Kenya's Turkana County, Christine Ewesit sorts the little maize she has left to feed her family. The mother of 4 says the ration is part of aid recently distributed to residents in the region.
When we wake up in the morning, our children have nothing to eat. They stay hungry all day and eat only in the evening. In the event that we have food stocks like this bag of maize, for example, there's nothing else to eat.
Pastoralist communities in Turkana have lived in this semi-arid region for centuries. But over the years, droughts have been a major threat to their herds and crops. Since August, the dry spell has left 1 million people short of food.
The current drought is still ongoing. It is still severe, and therefore the population is still being affected. The relief food through the county government is continuing. Relief food through the national government is continuing. That will continue until we make sure that we have the rains.
Kenya is hit by droughts every few years and has struggled to prevent hunger despite numerous projects to bolster people living in arid lands.
We are still suffering, but we are happy today with the food aid. The rations will help us get energy to work. The region has no rain. We thank whoever has brought this food here today. We are urging the county government to help us with water or even a borehole so we can irrigate our farms.
To improve food stocks, pastoralists are being encouraged to grow crops alongside keeping their livestock.
The maize on this farm is a reality, as you can see. The first time I harvested maize, I took it to the mill to get some maize flour for our meals. We used to hear about kale grown in other parts of the country. We've also planted it here, and it has done very well. Now, we can also wash our hands to eat kale like everyone else.
Kenya's Deputy President William Ruto announced last month that the government has allocated $19 million to respond to the drought. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
And to the subject of mines now, the United Nations has pledged to assist Somalia in dealing with the dangers posed by landmines and other explosive devices. Here is more on that story.
Having suffered decades of conflict, Somalia is littered with explosives. With the involvement of foreign troops that are battling the Al-Shabaab terror group, most Somalis often find themselves treading carefully, literally. Improvised and conventional explosive devices, including landmines, are part of the security nightmare in Somalia. On the International Day for Mine Awareness organized in Mogadishu, it was revealed that civilians account for 44% of fatalities caused by explosive ordinances.
The numerous deadly IED incidents in the high populated area, an obvious and tragic reminder of the harshness of the threat that we face. But by facing this threat and by working together, that we collectively will continue to enhance the protection of civilian, establishing effort, sustainable national capacity, and ultimate peace, security, development, and safe ground for the people of Somalia.
The path forward, achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, must be clear of landmines, explosive remnants of war, and improvised explosive devices. All people have the right to live in security and not fear their next step. Mine action clears paths and creates safe ground on which homes can be built or rebuilt. Mine action changes mindset so that people know how to protect themselves. It gives people and communities new horizons and hope.
So far, a total of 37 locations in the Horn of Africa nation have been identified as contaminated areas. The government says it will not relent in ridding the nation of these dangers.
We are dedicated through SEMA to double our efforts to provide safety, preserve dignity and observe human rights, and protect them from threats of explosive hazards and landmines.
United Nations has announced that it will help in demining Somalia. Chomhono, CGTN.
Now to South Sudan, where the United Nations Mine Action Service is highlighting the dangers of mines. With the government of Sudan, UN MAS highlighted its efforts on the International Day of Mine Awareness and assistance in mine action.
While South Sudan is no longer in the thralls of a civil war, landmines remain a persistent danger. This play aims to teach school children about the danger of mines and how to avoid them. It's part of the United Nations Mine Action Service efforts on the International Day of Mine Awareness.
The importance of this day actually is telling us any young children or young pupils should not go to the bush and pick some iron which is dangerous. Maybe it can affect them, such as it can lead to death or something like that.
The government of South Sudan also took part on raising awareness about mines.
Landmines and unexploded ordnance are still being discovered in residential areas and farming areas all over the country. The ordnance is mostly from the leftover War of Independence. Consequently, the theme for this year, Safe Ground, Safe Home for All, is very much in line with the vision of our country for peace and prosperity for all the citizens.
Through its work in South Sudan, UN MAS has cleared or verified over 1.2 billion square meters of land. It has cleared tens of thousands of mines and educated nearly 4 million people on mine risk education.
I want to thank the organizations
and the more than 900 South Sudanese that are not here today because they are out there clearing mines, educating people to the dangers and making this country safe. It is those people, more than 900 South Sudanese, working day in, day out, who we are here to honour and to thank. Landmines remain a problem in this country. They continue to kill and maim, but clearing them is achievable. We simply need to keep doing what we are doing.
The clearing of mines remains a priority, with United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres stating, "In our turbulent world, mine action is a concrete step towards peace." Astatal, CGTN.
This is Africa Live on CGTN. We appreciate you for watching. Let's now go to Rama for the latest business news. Rama.
Thank you very much, Richard. Here's what's coming up in business. Nigeria plans to raise $5 billion in foreign and local debt for infrastructure. And global oil prices approaching $70 a barrel as U.S. crude output reaches record levels.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's focus on Nigeria, where the government is looking for parliamentary approval to borrow over $5.3 billion for the 2019 fiscal year. Now, the funds are meant to fund infrastructure development and also provide a little bit of economic stimulus in the process. The debt office intends to raise over $2 billion through foreign borrowing and the remainder from locally issued Naira-denominated bonds. Nigeria is Africa's largest single economy. It's been racking up quite a bit of debt in efforts to boost economic growth, which has been pretty sluggish ever since it got out of a recession, the first in 25 years in 2017. Domestic debt will be made up of federal government bonds, sukuks, green bonds and saving bonds as well. The government is planning a 30-year Naira-denominated domestic bond. The public debt for the country was just under $79.5 billion by the end of 2018. Now, speaking of something that does come out of Nigeria, oil. Oil prices fell on Friday with the international benchmark Brent crude slipping away from the $70 mark. Brent dropped after briefly rising above that level in the previous session. US WTI crude was also down to nearly $62 a barrel. Experts say that the fall was due to supply concerns and worries about progress in trade talks between the world's top two economies, China and the US. Still, Brent is heading for the second week of gains. WTI, however, is having a much stronger run. It's on track for a fifth consecutive weekly rise. Oil prices have gained quite a bit this year after OPEC and producer allies like Russia agreed to cut output by 1.2 million barrels a day in order to prevent a supply overhang from becoming even bigger. A senior energy analyst at Interfax Energy, Abhishek Kumar, said that prices at this point are finely balanced. Still another oil-related story. Saudi Aramco, the world's largest oil-producing company, has made its case as to why it is the world's most profitable company by an enormous margin. It has revealed key financial data ahead of a planned bond issue. With the details, here's Jacob Greaves from Dubai.
Its wealth might be buried beneath the sands of Saudi Arabia, but now it's also available for all to see. Previously reluctant to disclose its financial details, Saudi Aramco has had to open the door as it looks to tap bond markets. The oil giant's 2018 core earnings were $224 billion, 3 times as much as Apple.
The financials look extremely healthy to us, whether you look at the leverage numbers, which look extremely low, or you look at the profitability numbers. The balance sheet and the P&L looks in a very healthy shape. Margins are stable, you have production stable, and moreover you have 3 years of data now that you have the prospectus out, right? So you have more transparency.
Despite the huge profits, credit agencies have rated it on a par with Saudi Arabia. Fitch and Moody's have graded it A+ and A1 respectively, a reflection of the state-owned oil company's ties to the kingdom's at times sluggish economy. But both have said without sovereign rating constraints, it would match better-rated international oil firms such as Chevron and Shell. Even after the recently announced stake in Saudi petrochemical firm SABIC for $69.1 billion, analysts say its balance sheet stands out.
In Aramco's case, it's actually got net cash, so it's got negative net debt, and its gross debt is fairly small. Obviously, this bond issue, if and when it goes through, will raise its net debt to a degree, but still, the cash reserves are very large. Some of those cash reserves, of course, are going to be used for the acquisitions, the stake in SABIC from the Public Investment Fund. So it'll move towards having less cash and somewhat more debt, but still it will have a very low net debt compared to the major international oil companies, which, as I say, have typically financed themselves rather more from debt.
Earlier this year, Saudi Arabia said Aramco's anticipated bond sale would raise $10 billion. This planned bond deal is also attracting attention as it's Aramco's inaugural transaction in international markets. That's after the firm pushed back their planned IPO for 2018, estimated at the time to be worth around $100 billion until 2021. The challenge is the fortunes of the world's top oil producer are still linked to energy prices and Saudi Arabia's broader economic development. Aramco will hope that doesn't put investors off this week as it looks abroad with a roadshow for bond buyers. Asia, Europe and the United States are said to be the main destinations. Notably, no Middle East country made the list as it looks to drill into international markets. Jacob Greaves, CGTN in Dubai.
And it was quite a set of numbers. Now, turning to Brexit, the UK Prime Minister Theresa May has formally asked the EU to delay Brexit again until the 30th of June. The UK is due to leave the EU on the 12th of April, and as yet, no withdrawal deal has been approved by British legislators. Earlier on, sources indicated that the EU Council President, Donald Tusk, has proposed to make an offer of a flexible 12-month extension. Now, that essentially would still allow the UK to leave sooner if Parliament ratifies a deal. But the plan has to be agreed on by EU leaders next week at an emergency summit on the 10th of April. Tusk said that the EU should not ignore the increasing majority, in his words, of British citizens who want to remain in the bloc. However, the UK Prime Minister Theresa May said she would look for a delay that is as short as possible. Some observers, however, say if the talks between the UK's Conservative and Labour parties do fail, the delay is likely to be a rather long one. Still with Brexit, the UK's government is scrambling to find some kind of consensus, any consensus, over the terms of a Brexit deal ahead of an April 12 deadline. The WTO Director General Roberto Azevedo warned on Thursday that the cost of a no-deal exit from the EU for the British economy would be, as he put it, significant.
There will be costs, and the costs may be very significant in some sectors and may be less significant in other sectors. But overall, there will be an impact. We all know that.
The Belt and Road Initiative is also part of our focus. It could see related investments worth as much as $8 trillion by 2020, according to some estimates. Economists expect that initiative to boost global trade by 12%, impacting more than 65 countries and nearly 2/3 of the world's population. Here's Angela Coppola with the details from Johannesburg.
Standard Chartered Bank in South Africa hosted representatives from the Chinese business community at a briefing session on the investment opportunities within the One Belt, One Road initiative. On a continental level, there are two economic growth concerns: increasing oil prices and debt levels.
Clearly for the region's oil importers, that creates pressure in terms of inflation, so the likes of South Africa and East African economies as well. I think the other key topic area at the moment has really been debt sustainability. So if you look at the likes of Zambia, Ethiopia as well, they have borrowed quite a lot from China, and we have seen concerns around how they're going to refinance that debt and also their Eurobond debt going forwards.
As the Belt and Road Initiative expands, African countries need to understand that capital is ubiquitous and policy frameworks and reforms are a key enabler.
labor markets. We need to be more productive. We need to be more flexible. Financial markets, we need to deepen the financial markets. We need transparency. We need clarity on convertibility. We need clarity on repatriation. I think that then puts us in a strong position, similar to other trade corridors.
The annual infrastructure gap is estimated at around $100 billion on the African continent, an opportunity yet to be fully exploited.
What the Belt and Road Initiative has done for Africa is given us another avenue to raise some of this large infrastructure finance that's needed. We've looked at some of the big projects like ports, railroads, big highways that honestly would not have been done if some of this Chinese investment would not have come in.
The Chinese have put a proposition forward. It's up to the rest of Africa to look at it and see how best can we take advantage of it. Maybe it's not optimal to approach this on a fragmented basis, but on regionalization. We can look at it from a regionalization point of view instead of sovereign point of view.
The One Belt, One Road initiative has changed the way that corporates and sovereigns are investing in infrastructure and other projects. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
All right, then I'll leave it there for the time being, but I'll be back at the top of the hour. Boeing apparently has taken responsibility. It's apologizing for the two fatal crashes involving the 737 MAX planes in Ethiopia and Indonesia. But where do we go from here, both for the company and its best-selling aircraft? We'll have some answers for you live from Washington at 1800 GMT. For now, though, back to Richard.
Thank you, Rama. We are not done just yet. We have a lot more news coming your way. Here's a sneak peek at what's coming up next. Egyptian women defy norms to lead adventure tours in the Sinai region.
Join us from Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. In Egypt, Bedouin women in the Sinai region are breaking traditional and gender stereotypes. We now follow 3 women who have decided to be tour guides in the Rocky Mountains of Wadi Sahu.
Yasser is leading hikers through the intricate trails of the majestic South Sinai Mountains. She and 3 other women from the Hamada tribe are guides for the Sinai Trail.
We want to integrate women for the first time in the tourism industry. They have never done it before. We would like tourists to come to this trail because some people don't have jobs and some are looking for employment. Those who do not have a job only work in tourism to earn their living.
Since 2016, this community-backed organization has been working to make hiking a sustainable form of adventure tourism to South Sinai. In the village of Wadi Sahu, tourism has been on the decline since the Arab Spring.
Yasser, she's a very strong woman. She's very unusual, I think, in the context of Bedouin society, because what she's doing is taking this first step that I think other women have been cautious about taking. She knows the mountains very well. She knows all of the ways. She knows the water sources, the plants, the animals, the old stories, the tribal boundaries.
North Sinai itself is a flashpoint of deadly violence between Egyptian security forces and insurgents. But the violence has not dissuaded a steady stream of avid hikers from heading south to take on the challenge of the desert and mountainous landscape.
If I was to listen to the advice that, for example, my government, the British government, would give about the Sinai, they would say, don't come, don't leave Sharm el-Sheikh, it's dangerous, it's kind of a no-go area. But through knowing the Sinai well, through walking thousands of kilometers with the Bedouin, I've really come to see that they take safety very seriously, they protect their area, and most of all, they know the Sinai better than anybody else.
The number of hikers has gone up from 100 in 2016 to 1,000 last year.
Coming from Bedouin guides, this was really strange. I didn't think that this could happen. This is why I got very attracted to this trip and I wanted to join.
Up until this point, 100% of those working on this trail were men. Yasser is shaking up centuries of cultural tradition, one hike at a time. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
Meanwhile, in Senegal, the megalithic stone circles located in the gardens of museums of black civilizations have officially been inaugurated. These stone circles are set to constitute a concentration of over 1,000 monuments. There are 1,987 monoliths spread over a geographical area between Gambia and Senegal. According to researchers, these are funerary remains of a civilization that existed 200 years before Christ. Due to their uniqueness, the Senegambian megaliths have been inscribed on UNESCO's World Heritage List since 2006.
These monuments are an invaluable heritage. Since they've been inscribed on the World Heritage List, only archaeologists have been able to contemplate these megaliths, which is why the government of Senegal has decided to transfer some of them and thus make them accessible to the public. By presenting them here, the whole of humanity will be able to appreciate this additional cultural richness of the people of Senegambia. For us, these stones are one of the most important exhibitions at the Museum of Black Civilizations.
When we know that history has denied several achievements accomplished by Africans, this is a concrete element that proves that the African continent had indeed experienced a technical glory. Being able to transport 8-ton stones at the time, for example, was a great technical feat.
These stones are exceptional. They can only be found here in Senegal. It is elements such as density, size, number of stones, but also the variety of stones and the finish of the work that made them quite exceptional works. We wonder how our ancestors were able to cut these stones, transport them and transplant them to different places when we need cranes, trucks and a lot of ingenuity to extract some of them.
This is Africa Live, and we've got your sports news coming up after the break. Let's check out the headline. Uganda seeks 2020 Olympics baseball qualification.